When I was a child, I heard a family history story about the Slater family. Mary Ann Slater is my third great-grandmother. Recently, as I saw the story written down, I began to question it. Here is the family history story. An important battle was fought between the British forces and Napoleon Bonaparte at a Belgian village 11 miles from Brussels in June 1815, known as Waterloo. There were 6 Slater brothers. These 6 men all stood 6 feet tall on their stocking feet. The 6 brothers were Napoleon's bodyguards. After the battle, one was missing. 2 of his sisters and his sweetheart, who were all nurses, with some of the others, went to search for him. It was quite dark, so they carried lanterns. They found robbers busy taking valuables from the dead. On seeing the nurses in white, they thought they were ghosts and ran away quickly. After looking quite a while, they saw a diamond ring glistening among the bodies. The man's sweetheart examined the ring and found that it was the one that she had given him for his birthday. They felt of his heart and found out that he was still alive. They carried him to camp, where the doctor dressed the wounds. The miraculous thing was that he had a small pocket Bible in his pocket that his girlfriend had given him, and he always carried it in his vest pocket just over his heart. The bullet had glanced off the Bible. This incident illustrates God's protecting power. When I reread that story, something just did not seem true, so I have done some research. My first question was, if they fought at Waterloo, why would Napoleon have them as his trusted guards when they were English and he was fighting the British? I looked for the original source of the story and found a cousin had uploaded a letter written in the 1960s to her grandmother, who was my great aunt, and that told this story. That's the only place I found for the source of the story. So I did some digging. My third great-grandmother, Mary Ann Slater, had only 4 brothers who were born in Belper, Derbyshire, England, between 1791 and 1809. The battle with Napoleon was at Waterloo and was in June 1815, so the oldest would have been 24 and the youngest 6. So I looked for some of the uncles of Mary Ann Slater and found that she did indeed have 5 uncles, but they were born between 1751 and 1768. So they probably would have been too old to fight in that battle, except for the youngest one. I researched some more about Napoleon, and he had a group called the Old Guard, who were the elite veteran elements of his Imperial Guard. They were often referred to as the Immortals. You had to have fought with Napoleon for 10 years and fought 3 military campaigns. You had to be over 5 foot 8 inches and under 35 years of age to be part of that guard. However, on the English side, there was the Royal Horse Guards, who started back in the 1650s and later known as the Blues. They had regiments that fought at Waterloo. So I think that story could not have been completely correct. However, I found a letter written February 6, 1963, written by a cousin, Samuel Eddy, to that same great aunt, who tells a slightly different version of this story. I quote, "Grandmother often talked about the Slaters, and I heard more from her. When she was a girl, her mother corresponded with the old grandmother, who was Mary Ann Slater, Alsop. Grandmother said that her mother had 8 cousins, all over 6 feet tall, who were in the Royal Guards and fought at Waterloo." That is probably the more accurate story. But as to the story about the nurses and who were sisters and girlfriends finding them, well, who knows? Mary Ann Slater did have 3 uncles, John, Samuel, and William, who came to America, and one made quite a name for himself in the early 1800s that I'd like to tell you about. His name was Samuel Slater, my 4th great-great-uncle. He was so famous that a 737-page book entitled Memoirs of Samuel Slater, the Father of American Manufacturing, was written by a man named George Savage White in 1836. I actually found that book in Google Books and was able to download it. Now, I'm not going to read the whole story, but here's a short version of the life of Samuel Slater. Samuel Slater's father inherited the parental estate called Holly House near Belpar, Derbyshire, England. He was the owner of several farms and had tenants with lots of land, and also ran a timber business. His father became dangerously ill and apprenticed Samuel out, who was then age 14, and his fifth son to a neighbor, Mr. Strutt, who owned a mill. He died soon after. Mr. Strutt was then building a large cotton factory, and he used Samuel extensively in his business. Samuel would spend his Sundays, his only day off, alone experimenting with improvements in the machinery for the mill. During his apprentice time, he became an expert machinist. At the age of 21, when he ended his apprenticeship, he had become the right-hand man and learned all about the business. Samuel didn't tell anyone of his intentions, but he asked his mother for his clothes so he could make a trip to London. On September 1st, 1789, he dressed as a farmer, not to draw attention, and booked passage to the newly formed United States. He had memorized most of the plans for machinery and brought some of the plans over in the soles of his boots. As the British government forbade factories, or any plans of factories, to be brought to America, they wanted to do the manufacturing in England and then sell their goods here in America. He actually violated British immigration laws by doing this, because they didn't want their secrets of their industrial technology spread to other countries. Just before boarding the ship, he sent his mother and brothers a letter letting them know what his intentions were. He arrived after 66 days at sea and landed in New York. In January of 1790, with two partners, he left for Providence, Rhode Island, to commence spinning cotton at a Pawtucket, Rhode Island mill. After arriving, the men rented a room and worked almost day and night for several months to put machinery parts together. While working on this new mill, he lived with Oziel Wilkinson and won the heart of his daughter Hannah, whom he married in 1791. It's interesting that Hannah became the first woman to win a patent in the United States. She got her patent in 1793 for inventing two-ply cotton thread. When word got out of William's success in America, some people of Belper called him Slater the Traitor, as they considered his move a betrayal of the town where many had earned their living at Strutt's mill. According to a family story, a few years later, a suspicious box was sent to them from England. They did not open it until they had contrived a way to do it safely. On opening it, several guns or something fired out, but nobody was hurt. In 1799, he was joined by his brother John Slater from England. John was a wheelwright who spent time studying the latest English developments and might well have gained experience of the spinning mule. Samuel put John Slater in charge of a large mill that he called the White Mill. In 1812, Slater built the Old Green Mill in East Village in Webster, Massachusetts. He moved to Webster due in part because of an available workforce. Slater's original mill stands what is known today as Slater Mill and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It's operated as a museum dedicated to preserving the history of Samuel Slater and his contribution to American industry. Slater's original mill in Pawtucket and the town of Slatersville are both part of the Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park. Samuel and Hannah had 10 children together, but 4 died in infancy. In 1812, Hannah died in childbirth. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, labeled Samuel Slater as the father of the American Industrial Revolution. Slater died on October 21, 1835, in Webster, Massachusetts, the town that he had founded in 1832, and named for his dear friend, Senator Daniel Webster. At the time of his death, he owned 13 mills in 3 different states and was worth about $1.3 million, which would be equivalent now to over $35 million. His papers and plans are all held at the Harvard Business School's Baker Library.